Welcome back. We are now going to go ahead and develop our CCBPM. So again, as always, right click new within your namespace, go into process integration scenario objects, select integration process. Let's give the name IP underscore collect files underscore 00. All right, IP underscore collect files underscore 00. That's a spelling mistake. So I'm going to not save it. Again, right click new, process integration and scenario objects, integration process, IP underscore collect files underscore 00. All right, perfect. So let's save our object and go into the full mode. And as always, close the processing log. So I have more real estate screen and I go here. First thing, as always, we will define our container elements, right? So the first container element is file rec. No, we'll just call it file source 1, right? It's the source file. I call it abstract interface. And the type is SIAA file source 1, right? Next, file source 2, abstract interface. Why do I not see files SIAA source 2? Let's look at that service interface. This is my this is my service interface SIAA. If you see here, it's saying abstract outbound instead of abstract. So let's change them into abstract. That was a bug here. I made a mistake here. It should be SIAA. I've made that change, saving that change, activating only my service interface. All right. Now I go back here. My file source 2 should now have my SIAA source 2. Perfect. And now my file target should, abstract interface should have SIAA file underscore target. Even the target message, I have a feeling, was not defined correctly. So let's go into SIAA target. Yep, I've not changed it to abstract. It's a common mistake everybody does. So you need to be a little more careful. So make sure your target interface is also abstract, service interface, activate. Sorry about that again. Now when I go back, I select my service interface here. Now I should see the target, right? Perfect. All right. With this, we are done with the first section of the CCBPM. Now before we go ahead and build the process, there's something that you need to be aware of, right? Let's take the I'll open the notepad. Let's say the first file has come in, the employee ID is 1. The same, before the second file, the DT underscore target, so source 2 file could come, the next file has come in, right? And now the second system has first sent the file of file 2. How does PI in the CCBPM layer know that it has to correlate which file? You need to tell the fact is, if you look at it logically, the employee ID is the correlating factor. It is what is used to correlate these two files and say combine these two files. So you need to tell to PI how to correlate or what is the field to correlate. And for that, again, let's go ahead into the full mode. And in the full mode, click on this editor. You will see something called graphic correlation editor. Okay. You are by default always in the graphical definition. Go into the correlation editor. When you go into the correlation editor, you see there's nothing. Now you give a name here. All right. The correlation name will be blank. You need to give the name here. You call it EMP employee ID underscore correlation. All right. And when you do that, save it. And now you should be able to see, oops. Okay, there's a bug. Correlation name is longer than 20 characters. There's only 20 character restriction. So I'll call it EMP ID CORR. All right. Correlation name is invalid. Why is that so? Okay, let's try that one more time. Probably EMP ID CORR. And I say save. Okay, perfect. I think the underscore was not allowed and that's why it didn't let me do. So I'm going to close the processing log. So let's call the employee correlation as EMP ID CORR and immediately you'll see that getting displayed here, right? Now you need to tell what is the field with which we are going to display it. So let's call it ID and type a string, right? employee ID is the correlation field, and you need to tell what are the involved messages. So source 1 is the involved message and source 2 is the involved message, right? You're going to call it, say, source 1 and source 2. For the source 1 and source 2 message, I'm going to use the ID to correlate it. Now it's asking me, hey, for the source 1 and source 2 message, which field is actually the ID, right? Remember that fields are different. So you just say container element and then select the XPath as employee ID. All right. Same way for this guy, select the container, click on the help, selection help, make sure you select the container element and you say employee number. So what you're telling, for the source message, the employee ID, look at the employee ID field, and for the target message, look at the employee number field, and these two are what is going to act as our correlation. Save, and now you're done. Your correlation ID has been defined. So with this, let's go ahead and then change it to graphical definition view. All right. Now in the graphical definition view, any file can come in any order, right? Which means typically your first step is your receive step, right? But then if I put a receive step, then how do I tell which message to receive? A receive step can only be associated with one message. So in this case, to enable parallel processing or to enable multiple branches of processing, use a fork step. So drag this fork step and put it here. All right. So now within the fork step, you say, just call it fork. All right. And make sure that there's no end condition and the necessary branches say 2. Now you drag the first receive step and put it into this guy, into the first branch here. And then drag one more receive step and put it into the, sorry, this is a little tricky that you need to be very careful about. Here we go. If I go, sorry. Yeah, perfect. So you need to make sure there are only 2 receive branches because you only receive 2 input messages. So let's say receive, now going to click on the receive 1 message, say click receive source 1, right? And then it is asking what is the correlation you need to use. So first select, sorry, let's save. Use a message, say give the message. Oops, what happened to the container element? Looks like the container elements were not saved. This is a bug in this version of PI. You need to be a little more careful. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead and create the container element. So file source 1, abstract interface, SIAA source 1, file source 2, abstract interface, SIAA source 2, and then I call it file target. Again, it's of type abstract interface and say SIAA target and then save. Okay, now it's saved. So now let's go here, select the message, file source 1, it's receiving the first message, use correlation, I'm saying employee ID correlation, and it's saying activate the correlation, say yes. All right. Oops. Let's do this one more time. Once you select the correlation, I'm going to minimize this a little. It's going to ask you, it's going to ask you what is the correlation you want to use, what is the message as always. Then it's going to say, hey, what is the correlation you want to use? Okay, so and say yes. Now, don't worry, this red line will go once the second receive step is done. So you say receive source 2. Okay, now in the message, you select file source 2. Perfect. It's going to ask use correlation. Say yes, select this employee ID correlation and say activate correlation as done. And it will automatically then pick up what is the field to be looked at and so on. And you're done. Okay. So now I've activated a correlation where both my messages are being received, right? Now, once both the messages are received, outside the fork, don't put it inside the fork, outside the fork, do a transform step. Basically, go here, select, drag the transform. Don't try to put it in any of the branches. Drag it outside the fork and put the mapping message, right? So this is map source 1 source 2 into target, right? So let's select the operation mapping. OM file oops, why is my operation mapping not visible? All right, let's save it. Let's look at our operation mapping. I think I know why, because we made a change in the server's interface that needs to be reloaded here and reactivated. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Let's make sure SIAA source 1 is abstract. This is also abstract. All right, now I'm going to drag it again. SIAA, and this is also abstract. Let's double click here. Yes, abstract. So now just make a dummy change. Because we had changed the service interfaces, we need to activate our operation mapping one more time. I have activated my operation mapping. Now I go back. I select my search for my operation mapping. Yeah, now you see source 1 to source 2 to target is visible. Say apply. Now it's asking me, hey, what is the source 1 message, right? So the source 1 message is file source 1. What is the source 2 message? File source 2. Select the file source 2, and the target message is file underscore target. All right, with this the mapping is also done, and the last step is going to be to send the message out, right? So send target message. It's a send step. All right, here what is the message that I'm going to send? File underscore target, and I'm done. All right, so I've saved my mapping, and with this my CCBPM is done. So what did we do in the CCBPM? We inserted a fork step, and the fork step is going to have 2 branches. The number of branches is 2. Excuse me. And within each of them you are going to have a receive step that is going to receive and activate the correlation. All right, then you had a map step to do the mapping, and you had a send step to send the message out. We also defined a correlation. The correlation was called employee ID correlation. Remember, there are some naming convention challenges. Give a name for the correlation, tell the involved messages, source 1, source 2, and give the XPath. All right, with that our CCBPM is done. Go into my change list, and I'm going to activate my CCBPM. Perfect, my CCBPM is activated. I'm going to close all my objects now. With this, we have done with defining the CCBPM in the enterprise service repository. We shall now proceed to do the configuration in the integration directory. That is in the next session, and I shall see you there soon.